Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Street Cop Trading Podcast. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of Street Cop Trading. My name is Dennis Benino, and I forgot to turn my phone off on that ring. So we'll re-record this later on, Frank, but I'm going to turn my phone off because I want to tell Hannah Haimann, who's here with us today, our in-house clinician, therapist, I don't know how she wants to describe herself, that guess what? I now have an iPhone. The first time ever in my life.
Congratulations, I guess.
Yeah, I started drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I think all smartphones are pretty much equal these days, but do whatever makes you happy, I guess.
It's not an easy transition. I got to be honest with you. I still activated my old phone and my other phone number and have that with me at all times because I'm just not used to the platform yet.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little different.
Hannah, I don't know if we've done this before. Why don't you tell everybody, maybe it's the first time them hearing about who you are, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of New Jersey. I'm a national certified counselor. I have my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I am trained in the modality of brain spotting. And the reason I'm working here at Street Cop is because I'm married to a police officer, and I think that the mental health training that most officers have today is pretty inadequate, and I wanted to provide a fresh voice, a fresh perspective, and give officers some tangible resources that they can start using immediately to address the needs that they have.
When we say mental health training inadequate for police officers, that's no question about it. But what do you think about, and maybe you can't say this, but do you think it's just police officers who have a inadequate mental health system?
No, I think it's pretty much all of America right now. I think there's been a really good job to push the conversation from acceptance of anxiety and depression, but there's still a lot of stigma around substance abuse, around some of the personality disorders like bipolar 1, bipolar 2, borderline schizophrenia. You know, most people, when they come to see me for an intake and I ask them what's going on, they'll say something along the lines of, I'm just anxious or depressed. I'm not crazy. Like, I don't have like bipolar or anything. And I'm like, all right, like we got a long way to go. So I think the general public still doesn't really quite understand, and there's still a lot of confusion around the concepts of trauma, which is what I try to specialize and tailor my services to.
Do you think a big step for somebody to begin with, and again, I'm just asking out of the blue here because I'm not a trained licensed professional at all, is it an acknowledgement or a diagnosis of some kind of issue?
No, I actually don't really believe in diagnosing that much. I think it's not really necessarily important. So really what diagnosing is let's contextualize these symptoms so that we, the clinician, and you, the client, can have better understanding of them. And so it's really just kind of like a classification system to simplify and better understand like what's going on. My perspective is that most people are dealing with a lot of unresolved issues that have been impactful or traumatic to them, and it's caused this snowball effect of a disruption of behavior, a disruption of thoughts that's now presenting as anxiety, depression, as these other things. But my perspective is, and again, this is just mine, there's many counselors out there with many different perspectives, but if we get to the root of what's impacting you, and if we can resolve that and help you process through that, my belief is that there's a resolution in all these other symptoms.
Have you met somebody that comes or is in life without trauma? Or what's the best, if we all have trauma, what's the best somebody could expect to be?
So I think everybody has gone through something that's impacted them. And this is a really big, right here is like a really big shift for me. I think we need to do away with the word traumatic because people immediately associate it with specific things, specific events. And so they just dismiss it. Oh, no, I don't have any trauma. But that doesn't mean things haven't happened to you that have been impactful. And so I think it's really important for people to start changing their language and start asking themselves, well, what's been impactful to me? And when you change the language, I would say 10 times out of 10, most people come up with at least something that's impacted them, and therefore they need to work through how that's affected them.
I know there's a lot of talk, or I at least heard it before, between small T's and large T's.
Yeah.
Is that something you follow, that kind of process?
Not really, because, and I talk about this in my, my Trauma 101 program, is that at the time that was introduced, it was a way to, again, better understand, better help, better allow people to understand like what's happened to them, big T and little t. I don't use it because I think it breeds comparison. And so I think people, sometimes look at these things and they're like, oh, well, I didn't go to war, So my little t of just having divorced parents or not having stable living or being low socioeconomic status, that doesn't count because it wasn't in the big T category. Personally, I don't give a fuck. If you say it impacted you, let's roll with it. Because your psychological effects could be the same. So someone who went to war and somebody who maybe had more adverse childhood experiences, their psychological effects are the same. So what does it matter if it was a big or a little t? Let's just address the problem.
On the same side of things, do you think that there are people who may have been to war and have not had a large T from a war? Can somebody basically live their mental state reverse of what is quote unquote, I guess I don't want to say typical because I know that's going to be a word that's diminished.
So I think if I'm hearing you right, I think it's possible for someone to have, been a combat veteran and seen some really horrific things and they don't present with the classical signs of PTSD. They're not somebody who is, severely traumatized. They seem to be operating pretty functionally. However, my perspective, should they still probably get some help to at least process through some of that? Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't think people really contextualize the significance of being in a combat affected area. And when I see these things on Fox News about the Ukraine crisis, I don't think that they have any concept. And to be honest with you, I think it's shameful that our news organizations are actually not even talking about the reality of what these people are going through. And, my friend who's Ukrainian, who came here as an immigrant, who's a cop here, in New Jersey, said, if you would actually see the things that my friends are sending you, it's a whole different thing. I mean, we're sitting here like, oh, it's no big deal. They're dealing with a conflict. It is completely massacre. And I don't know how people can try to conceptualize. I think things like the Holocaust, when we talk about, have you ever thought of what it would have been like to have been a Holocaust encamped in one of these concentration camps? I don't think people really get. I don't think we can even try to touch on those subjects. I try to imagine what it must have been like, and I don't think people really can understand what that means.
I agree. I think, especially here in America, again, this is a general statement because there's still plenty of people that go through a lot of hardships, but an event like the Holocaust, I don't think we can quite fathom it. I don't think we can quite understand it. And if you look at it I don't even really know if many Americans outside of our veterans and maybe police officers and first responders can even understand violence and war, what that really looks like. Because we haven't really fought wars on our shores, right? There was Pearl Harbor and stuff like that. But even that was far out to sea. And it was not our homes it wasn't our lands, it wasn't our grocery stores and stuff like that. So I think it's very difficult for a lot of Americans to really understand and comprehend the whole concept of war, because despite we do have high crime and high violence in our communities and especially in our inner cities, I won't even jump on that soapbox, but, I think so those people might be a little more aware of it. But I think in general, we don't even know what that looks like. We don't know what it feels like because we haven't really fought wars on our soil.
I think about a lot of people who are constantly trying to cast their own opinions about things. And would you agree that it's probably not a good idea for others to cast opinions about other people and their mental states, or I think a lot of people should keep their opinions to themselves. Yes. Where do you think that comes from? Why do you think people have opinions like that when they start judging about other folks?
I think it's really easy to cast judgment and opinions on things that you don't understand, that confuse you or that scare you. And so I think a lot of people, it's really easy to sit, and when you don't understand something or you haven't experienced it yourself, it's really easy to form an opinion of it and to be like, well, I would just do this if I was in their shoes. You don't know that. You genuinely don't know. And so that's when the whole practice of empathy is really important. And it comes into play because it's really about thinking about what it would be like to be in someone's shoes and be like, okay, well, if I had that upbringing, if I felt like I had no options on the table, if I felt scared, if I felt alone, if I felt desperate and lonely, would I make the same decisions as this person that I'm judging? Maybe, possibly, and so I think oftentimes people judge and cast opinions and judgments because they don't understand and they're not really thinking about what it might be like to be that person.
Do you think that everybody needs therapy or could use therapy? I think it's two questions there.
It's two questions. I'm going to say yes. And before people say, well, that's obvious, she's a counselor. I think everyone's been through something. I genuinely think everybody has been through something in a relationship, in their life. They've been through a hardship. Something's impacted them. Even if it's something that from my perspective, I'm like, well, that's not the worst thing I've ever heard. You know, if it mattered to you and it impacted you and it affected the way you see yourself, the way you think about yourself, the way you participate in relationships, then I think it's important to address it. And it's not really up for me to decide if it was severe or not. My perspective as a counselor is if it mattered to you and you've identified that it's impacted you, it's worth talking about. And I think everyone has gone through something.
So piggybacking off of that question, what's the point of therapy?
The point of therapy is for it to end. And the reason why it should end is because the goal should be to return the client or bring the client into a better level of functioning. And that's going to be different for everybody. And so someone's better level of functioning or higher level of functioning, it might not look the same across all people because we're not all the same and we don't all have the same capacities. But it's to bring about like more of like a resolution or a management of the symptoms that you're dealing with so that this person feels confident and trusting in their intuition, in their thoughts, so that they do feel more confident and capable of making decisions and participating in relationships without the need to process through everything in a 1 hour, 45-minute session, like with a therapist.
What do you say to somebody who maybe one is a little hesitant to seek a therapist, or two, doesn't think it's for them?
So those are two different things. So for someone who doesn't think it's for them, I would encourage you to confront why, where those thoughts come from. Are they your own thoughts, or are they thoughts that have been ingrained in you by somebody in your life that maybe you look up to? In the policing community, I think maybe these thoughts come from supervisors. Maybe people that have been like, you don't need that shit, just tough it out, power through. Ask yourself if you want to be taking advice from this person, especially in your mental health, and if that advice makes sense to you. And then for the people that are afraid to seek it out, I would again encourage like, what's so fearful of you? For some people, it might just be afraid to change. And that's a really tough thing for a lot of people to go through, but just know it's a gentle process. If you're working with a good therapist, it's going to be a work at your own pace thing. I tell all my clients, I'm like, this is your time. You decide what we talk about. You decide where we go in this session. I'm never going to make you talk about something that you don't want to talk about or that you're not ready to unpack. So for most clients, they should feel empowered and like they're in the driver's seat because this is their healing process.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Thank you.
That's good. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm trying to think of the things that maybe somebody listening to this podcast, and we're growing exponentially every single day, which is pretty wild, what they might be thinking about the questions, because I think when we get to this topic, it's one of those topics where people are probably shameful to ask questions about.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to ask questions on behalf of the audience of things that maybe maybe things that I've seen, maybe not me personally. I've been led to believe that sometimes the anxiety of actually contacting a therapist is something that prevents people from contacting therapists.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And there's actually some statistic, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's like a really strong percentage of people who reach out for a therapist. They make an appointment and then they no-show the first appointment because they actually felt a reduction in their symptoms. So just reaching out to the therapist and feeling like help was on the way reduces symptoms sometimes so significantly for people that it convinces them that their problems are resolved. And so they no-show sessions, they no-show appointments. And so that's actually, I forget the number off the top of my head, but in regard to, the community that we're trying to reach here at Street Cop with officers, like, point blank, I don't need to know your story personally or in detail to know like you've been through some shit. So there should absolutely be no hesitation, because I can guarantee you've done and seen things on the job. The things that you've seen and done on the job are affecting you. They're affecting your relationships. They're affecting your children. They're affecting your happiness, your participation in life. It should be like a no-brainer. Like police officers should be getting mental health services because it's like going to be absolutely imperative for your overall functioning long term.
Somebody who may make that appointment and then decide not to go, or find themselves hung up in trying to get to that area, to that clinician's office to go actually have the therapy session, are there any steps you could offer to them once that appointment's made in that second phase, we'll call it, quote unquote, of when they're like, all right, I made it, but I'm not going to go. I'm not ready for this. Da, da, da. I just listened to a podcast this morning on impact theory.
Okay.
I'm sorry, School of Greatness. My apologies. And it was from a while ago. I try to kind of sift through. The guy's got, it's Lewis Howes, and he's great. And I think he has, 1,500 episodes to sift through. And I've only been listening to his podcast for a few months now, so I've got a lot to choose from. So I'm being very nitpicky in the beginning. I know everything's going to have value in it at some level, but I'm trying to find things that speak to me now. So people will often ask me about book recommendations. What should I read? Yeah. Well, the question is, where are you at? Mm-hmm. So it depends. I don't need to read a book that's a beginner book for business. But sometimes those principles aren't bad to be reminded of when you've kind of lost sight of that. Moving forward, Mel Robbins does something that she actually did do you know who Mel Robbins is?
No.
Okay, so it's cool. You'll like her. If you go to her TED Talk, I think she has like 11 million views, 100 million views on this TED Talk. And she talks about this thing where she invented, it's called a countdown. So it's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's her way to cope with anxiety. So she talks about when you wake up in the morning and you go to hit the snooze button, instead of that, count it down like a rocket taking off. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you're getting your brain in this loop to get up when you hear that. I do it. But I don't need to do it very often. Mine goes like this. You can close your eyes. You can go back to sleep and be a bitch. Or you can get your ass up and have the day you wanted to have that you planned from the night before. So get the fuck up, go piss, and go brush your teeth, and then start meditating. I actually meditate before I brush my teeth.
Okay. But
that's what I do every morning. So I go wake up. I'm like, I have enough sleep. I'll check the time. I'm like, all right, I have enough sleep. I need to get 7. So I have to get 7 hours of sleep in. I can cope with 6 or 6.5. I will die at 4. Yeah. You will not like me at 4. Not because I'm rude. I'm not a jerk off. I'm just like a dud walking around. Mm-hmm. People actually tend to interpret it like I'm mad because, you've met me. Now we know each other for a while now. I'm generally upbeat, optimistic, and energetic. When you see me not energetic, people are just like, yo, is everything okay? Did something happen? I'm like, yeah, I just didn't sleep.
Yeah.
So is there anything like that could help fix that anxiety of, I don't want to say fix, I know it's kind of a taboo word, but to try to address that anxiety of making the appointment, showing up to the session?
I would say first and foremost, it's normal to have anxiety going to your first session. I think 90% of the clients I see for the first time are very anxious, and I can see it all over them. Mm-hmm. It's just crawling out of them. And most of them will start the session with, I don't really want to say too much. I kind of just want to do this. And before you know it, things are just tumbling out of their mouths. And people say I don't know why I'm saying this, or I don't know why I'm crying. I'm not really like this. And I'm like, it's because it needed to come out. It's okay. This is everyone's first session. So if you're experiencing anxiety leading up to your first counseling session, it's okay. It really is. But I would encourage people who feel that way. There's a reason you made the appointment. There's a reason you got to this point in your life. And right now there's 100% a shortage of counselors and therapeutic help available to people. So if you were lucky enough to get in with someone to make an appointment and it's on the calendar, just go. Just go and see what it's like. If you show up and you decide, okay, I'm never coming back here again, say what you need to say to get through the hour, whatever it may be. But don't no-show, because I don't know when the next opportunity is going to come for you to be able to get on someone's caseload. Mm-hmm. And that's a nationwide issue right now. And so I would just say, do what you need to do to kind of power through that. Maybe you take a few deep breaths, but if you're feeling anxious, just know that it's normal. It's okay. Most therapists know that you're probably going to come into a session a little hot. And by a little hot, I mean, sometimes I have clients who in their first intake, they have full-blown panic attacks, and it's par for the course.
And just walking through a breathing exercise.
Yeah, it's different for everyone. So if some people already know how to manage their panic attacks, some people need to walk around, some people, they need something cold, they need water, they need cold air in their face. So I just kind of take the client's lead. If they don't know what's going on, then it's a bit of a trial and error, but obviously calm them down, get them to a better point of functioning, and then proceed from there.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Interesting stuff. And, as you're walking people through this stuff and then we're progressing on, what is the benefit that you're seeing when clients graduate with you?
What benefit do I see for them?
Yeah.
They have better lives. Like, they have better relationships. They tell me, like, oh, I'm not fighting so much with my spouse or my significant other.
It's wonderful.
My kids told me they like being around me again.
It's wonderful.
I go into work and I don't feel anxious or upset. I'm sleeping better. I feel less irritable. You know, like, how could you not feel happy for people when you see that they're participating in their lives with better, like, more fully? And so right now, I'm going to be honest, it's a rough go of it because of the world that we live in and the way that things are unfolding and the way that people are impacted. But I encourage people to look for the small wins that they have, and to just celebrate what's in their control and the progress that they have made.
I know that earlier you spoke about police officers seeing trauma. Do you think, you're married to a cop, and it's no secret that there is, I will put this out there with the intention of trying to understand some of it. What is the correlation between alcohol and law enforcement, and why is it so prevalent? Why do you think that is?
Yeah. So it's really, like, not that great of a mystery, right? So officers see a lot of shit on a daily basis. And oftentimes what happens is a lot of officers, before they even step onto the job, they had a whole life before that. So they had a whole potential, let's just say they joined the police academy after college, because you kind of need a bachelor's degree here in New Jersey. So let's just say they're 20, 21.
Let me back it up. High school diploma.
Really?
Civil service high school diploma. Some places put a 2-year degree or 60 credits, and then, like, a very few agencies require a 4-year degree, and they're actually getting rid of that because they're getting rid of all these college requirements. Because first of all, you and I both know that a bachelor's degree doesn't make, that makes no difference in who you like. Right. I don't have any like, I had college because I put myself through the police academy because I was in corrections when I first started, but the selection pool greatly increases when you remove some of these silly things like a college degree. And what these agencies do is they put incentives in. But, you got agencies, and I know off the top of my head, they're like, yeah, dude, we would have so many more candidates, but we require 4 years. Right. I know for a fact of an agency that just got rid of their they actually had an associate's degree language, and they moved it to 60 credits, and now they're getting rid of that.
Okay.
So you have people with 60 credits, like, but it's not associate's degree, and that's what the township ordinance says. And they're like,
got it.
But I have 60 credits. Like, yeah, no, we know, but it's not what it says.
Okay.
So I think that a lot of agencies are getting away from that, just on a quick side note.
Perfect. Okay. I thought you needed a 4-year degree. Not a problem. So regardless, alcohol. So let's just say they're coming into the academy at 18 years old. They've still had 18 years of life that has happened to them before they got into this job, that they're going to see horrific things. They're going to be exposed to a lot of things that disrupt their nervous system and that causes these really strong reactions in them. Now, let's say that they're at a department that doesn't necessarily value mental health, and it's that suck it up and deal with it mentality, which is most of them. Correct. And so if you take a person who is experiencing trauma on top of trauma, it's actually called complex PTSD, which is layered traumatic events. So PTSD was a diagnosis that was put in the DSM on the basis of someone has experienced just one traumatic event. I would say most often, though, now people are more experiencing complex PTSD because they're experiencing multiple traumatic events that don't get resolved, and they layer one on top of the other. So then we have officers that have dysregulated nervous systems. So they are acting in a way that is chaotic. Their thoughts are racing. They constantly feel unsafe in their brains and in their bodies, and they're amped up 24/7 because they're most often in a sympathetic nervous system dominant state, which means that they're in that fight or flight response all the time because they never resolve their issues, and despite the trauma, they're not being involved in the traumatic event, their bodies are still responding as if they are. So they feel amped up all the time. So it's a very natural thing to then realize that they reach for something, alcohol, a depressant, which brings their systems back down. And so they get a temporary release of that fight or flight response because they're induced in, like, an alcohol haze, or even if they're not drunk, like, still, like, one drink, like, we all know it, like, you start to relax a little, right? You start to calm down. And so this becomes a really dangerous game because if alcohol then is your main coping mechanism, because consciously or subconsciously you're doing it to calm down, well, it has an addictive quality. And before you know it, all of a sudden it's not a choice anymore. It's a demand that your body and your system is making. And so then we have a high percentage of police officers that become addicted, and then that begins a whole other mental health issue of substance abuse. But I always conceptualize substance abuse as it's typically a coping mechanism that got out of hand. Because I don't know anyone that just woke up one day, and I've worked specifically with substance abuse populations. I don't know anyone that just woke up and was like, yeah, I just decided to become a drug addict. It felt like a good idea for me. It always starts in response to something else. And so for officers, it's just not that hard to see where it starts in response to, I got to come down. I got to figure out a way to like deal with all this shit, and I don't know how. I choose this. It's socially acceptable.
I'm trying to dig in and be a little selfish here for a second of why I used to consume alcohol the way that I did. And I'd like to unpack that. I don't know if we...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to... I think I have an idea of what it is, but maybe I don't know what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, this is typical when I used to... This is pretty much why you won't see me drinking. Because first of all, I've said this 1,000 times. Alcohol is my best friend, my worst enemy. And
for most people, it is.
Best times of my life were very funny. And now I look back on it, I'm just very embarrassed about a lot of stuff that I did while I was induced. And, you know, especially now with the responsibility of being a social media influencer, a police thought leader, there's a lot of responsibility that comes along with this. And what that means is I have to represent at a level that I can't really allow myself to... I don't like me when I drink. Yeah. Okay. Like I do, but it's got to be like really with a close knit group of people that I can trust. Like I drank at our Christmas party, and you, Frankie's watching this thing at the same time, our podcast producer, but I had a great time. We had a lot of fun. We were laughing. I was silly. Everybody that was there, I could trust. The problem is in a public environment, I don't know. It's not that I just don't want to be caught off guard when somebody's like, "Oh my God, I like you," and and like all the things that you do, and it's great. And I'm like, "What?" Right? Like I'm like, "Wait, this is my fucking hero."
Right.
And this dude, and I hate to sound so ridiculous. I mean, but some people really see us that way.
Yeah.
And to just not be able to give a good answer, or it happens. I've gone out. I do go out. I try to be a little social in the summer. I may go to, Jersey Shore. So when you're social at the Jersey Shore, that means you're drinking.
Yeah.
And
typically.
People will grab me, like, "Yo, street cop, bro, Uncle Den." And I'm like, "Oh no." I'm like, people are recording me. Yeah. And I'm like, "Dude, I don't want this to like fucking get out." Like, you know what I mean? Not that I'm getting crazy, but I'm just trying to enjoy my life as a regular person.
Right.
So I'm curious, why would somebody have behavior like that for so many years? And I got to tell you, now that I'm thinking about it, that's kind of the road I was led into when I started at 19/20 and then turning 21 for the purposes of this program, is to, hey, we're all going out, right? We're all going out drinking. Hey, after the shift, we're all going out drinking. Yeah. And I wanted to fit in, and that's where it started. It started the heavy drinking with everybody else.
Yeah, and so I think this is part of the dual problem that we're seeing in police departments is one is don't talk about it. Just shut that shit down. Don't deal with it. Don't be a bitch. Don't be, whatever. Like, just don't talk about it. But we'll all go out and drink about it. And so it does become this thing where it's kind of ingrained in the culture. But if we take this back, if we, widen the scope, so the police departments, that's a micro environment. But if we look at our macro environment, alcohol is used for everything in our society. Bad day, drink. Good day, drink. Sad about something, drink. Happy about something, drink it off. Mommy wine culture is like a very big and prevalent thing. So if we just look at society, like alcohol is just very socially acceptable for pretty much anything and everything.
Can I jump in and say this? It's also very socially unacceptable to decline alcohol.
It is.
You know how nuts that is? You know the kind of looks I get when people are like, "What do you want, bro?" And I'm like, "A water." And they're like, "No. Let's say we're drinking." I'm like, "You're drinking. I'm watching." That's people, "Oh, let's go get a beer after class." I'm like, I'll get a milk. Right? I don't, and if it's got to be organic and $7 a fucking half gallon. You know what I mean? So I don't want it steroid free. I'll let you, So anyway, it's very socially unacceptable. It's
very socially acceptable to drink, and it's definitely very frowned upon not to drink. It's questioned, like eyebrows get raised, right? And so I think then it's really easy for, again, if we're thinking about like 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that are now like entering into the police academy, well, this is pseudo their college experience, right? And like
I was 19.
Yeah, all their friends are away at school drinking, and it's just like part of the culture. Like it's part of like the fabric of a society almost. And so it's not really difficult to see why people are like, well, why would I go talk about my problems and actually have to dig through them? I can just mask them. And everyone else is masking them. So I'm doing what's socially acceptable. That's what I'm going to do. And again, then it just kind of becomes something that gets out of hand because you have this addictive property to it. And before you know it, it's now not in your control anymore.
We had a guest on the podcast, a guy from North Jersey who does mental health police. He's a counselor. And I never understood, because he said the first time, and I don't want to do a disservice to somebody who might be having a drinking problem, because mine might have been more party problem than drinking problem. Because I wasn't trying to escape my problems. I was trying to create insanity. Okay. For the most part. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Maybe I was trying to escape my problems. That's why I'm here to fucking try to unpack them. So, I mean, I'm just being vulnerable for the street cop society here. But he said the first time he ever drank alcohol was like bliss for him. Like he'd never felt that kind of euphoria in his life. And for me, I had to learn to like it. I fucking hated it. Okay. I couldn't stand the taste of it. I didn't like the way it made me feel. Yeah. And I just forced myself to get used to it because I wanted to fit in more, I think.
Yeah, I think whether you choose alcohol, whether you choose weed, whether you choose other drugs, whether you choose sex or food or shopping, people are just looking to like mask pain.
Sex is another one. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's anything that releases that dopamine rush. Gambling, like that's a big one. I know. Well, other people might love it. Yeah. Sports gambling. Come on, it's gotten huge, absolutely massive. Like everyone has like a DraftKings playbook now. Like everyone's doing it, and
I think the shit gets old after a while. I think people just live on it forever. Because I feel like I go through phases.
Well, I think people can say the same thing about drinking, right? Like, doesn't that shit get old? Why are you still doing that? It's because you're no longer really in control of it. You're just seeking a dopamine hit. And there's so many studies that have been done that all these things, what they have in common is that they release these pleasure senses in the brain. So people just continue to seek it out regardless of whether they realize it's productive for them, it's good for them. You know, a lot of people do reach this cognitive place in their life where they're like, oh, fuck, this probably isn't that good for me. But the chemical and mental and emotional addiction is already there. And so they can't stop. And so I think for a lot of people, it's almost like just picking your poison. Like people who are maybe not engaged in therapy and not actively addressing their issues in a productive manner, oftentimes they are coping with it in some other way.
So I agree with the dopamine hits. I don't want to publicly go into my life way too much. But some of the things that I was into, they have shifted where I felt that they were no longer impacting me positively or not giving me that dopamine hit anymore. Yeah. And I can tell you explicitly when those moments were, although I care not to share those moments because I think that it might create judgment. And I don't want to I don't mind putting myself out there for the purpose, but I don't put myself out there and give somebody fuel to try to return and throw it back in my face. Now, again, not that I'm super scared of it, but when we shift from bad addictions to good addictions, are there such things as good addictions?
I don't know.
And does everybody have an addictive personality in some sense?
No, not everyone has an addictive personality. As far as good addictions, I don't know if that is such a thing. I think everything needs to be done in moderation because you can even look at working out, right? Like working out could be a really easy thing to be seen as like, oh, it's a good addiction, except it's not. Because what happens when you need to work out or you can't hang out with your friends and you're blowing off social engagements and you're withdrawing? What happens when you're getting hurt, like you physically got hurt and you absolutely still have to work out? You're just doing damage. And so I think anything to excess probably isn't going to have a positive effect on your life long term. And so I think it's just healthy to always be like looking at like what purpose is this serving in my life? And am I able to draw a boundary with it? Or do I feel like this is controlling me? And if you feel like something's controlling you, it might be a good idea to maybe kind of evaluate where your boundaries are.
I know I'm going down this path because I'm trying to, again, explore me a little bit. You saying that, I'm much comfortable in saying that, like, I've lived a very balanced life in my thoughts. And I, you know me long enough now. I think I'm pretty arbitrary. I try to step out, see things neutrally, and I try to go, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't good, or maybe this wasn't good. Right. So that's a relief. Yeah. Because I do love business. And I think what I love more than business is having an impact. And, there are a friend of mine, I gave advice this morning, and the advice went like this. First of all, law enforcement is a completely unfair profession. You want to know why? Because there are no rules. The game doesn't have rules to it. So if you're trying to progress in law enforcement, I'm talking about the inside, there's no rules. You want to get promoted? Well, how do I do that? Well, it depends, right? There are no rules. Yeah, exactly. Like these are the rules, but they may change and they vary, and nepotism and all these things. So when you're somebody who is talented and knows your worth, to be in a game that there's no rules when you know you can win if you were given the rules, it's very frustrating. So my friend finds himself in this. And I said to him, because he's frustrated and he was venting to me, and I said, acknowledged, no question about it. However, we tend to think when we get kicked in the dick, all we do is get kicked in the dick nonstop. But the reality is you don't get kicked in the dick too often. It happens, but it makes you feel like it's happening all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's actually not. I'm going to get kicked in the dick. I'm just waiting for the next one to come along, whether it's somebody writing an article about me or this person saying this about me or us trying to do this or us trying to do that, and then somebody's got something to say about that or this. But in these moments of calm, which this time in my life it's a very calm moment, I'm like, man, we really have a chance to make this thing better. My top priority is keep names off of that fucking wall in Washington, D.C., where they etch all the law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. Yeah. And if sharing some of the things that you want to share and doing some of the things that you want to do, it's real mental work. And every day I kind of get a high and a low of like I didn't do enough. Not in a panic. I'm just like, fuck, I could have done more today. That may have done more in the long run. But also a very big high of like, wow, we're really fucking doing something like who knew it would be us? Right. And the best part is like collabing with other people who are on the same page as us and us shunning the non-believers. I've got 1,000 thoughts a day. Right. You try to like... Was
there a question in there?
I don't...
You just want me to respond? Because I do have a thought on it.
Yeah.
And sorry, I keep
no, it's okay.
you, I think.
We both have very long legs.
Yeah, so... I think there's something to be said about like trusting the timing of your life. And you just said like, oh, I could have done more. I could have done this. I could have done that. Like the timing of your life from my perspective is always right. And you might not understand like why something's happening at this moment in your life. But there's always going to be probably a point in time where you can look back and absolutely understand. Blessing in
disguise,
right? Like exactly. Like you can absolutely like pinpoint exactly why things happened. And like
the best.
Just on a personal note, like I can pinpoint exactly why everything had to happen to lead up to get me to meet my husband, which then led me down different paths, which eventually led me here to Street Cop doing a podcast. You know what I mean? And so I think for anyone listening, if you feel like, to use your terminology, you're getting kicked in the dick and you don't really know why, just accept it. Let it be. Take your lessons. Take your time. Take some patience. Take a deep breath. And just know that this isn't your forever. Work through it. Go to counseling if you need to really process maybe some anger, some disappointment that came up for you in this. But just realize like there's a reason things are happening, and you don't necessarily have to know it now to be able to like look back and see the significance or the importance of it.
There is something that I need to find, and it's Tom Hanks. It's a video clip. It is probably the most profound. I've talked about it before with you.
I don't know.
It is the most profound clip for me that I've found thus far in my life. And it's him, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Shia LaBeouf, and somebody else at this round table. And Tom Hanks recites this poetic, he must have it memorized. I don't think it was him that created it. And he talks about life and time. Okay. He's like, everything's going well. You're on the top. Don't worry. Give it some time.
Yeah, it's true.
Things aren't going good in your life. They're talking bad about you. This is happening. Life's tough. Don't worry. Give it some time. And the thing just goes on and on and on. So what it means is, what I've realized when something significant happens in my life, I can say these things to myself of like, all right, brother, like this ain't easy. This is a tough one. This is not difficult, but it's one foot in front of the other. Yeah. And it's time. And over time, things do shift and change. And to finish up what I did my friend this morning, I said, life's not going to stop kicking you in the dick. Just have perspective of what you have in life that is wonderful. And I said, you have beautiful, healthy children. You have a gorgeous best friend, which that was me. But, yeah. So he was laughing. And I said, but you got to remember those things. So it's hard for us to really remember what you need to be thankful for. So shift back to that might help you get through that moment in life. But I've been there. I've been in a situation where I've had some heavy investigations going on just because of the police work thing. And right. Not even that I was a target, but like, you're like, oh my God, they're going to shift me to target. Like, this is a big one and I'm not the target, but I'm involved. And this came out and this is on the this is in the paper. And this doesn't make any sense. Why did they put this? But that's not the truth. And like, how's this going to impact me? And I'm like, all right, let's just give it some time. Mm-hmm. So it's a real good way of dealing with a lot of things. Life is just, I think that recently I had a family member of mine, we literally watched die about a month ago. And, you know, I just imagine, I've heard this a million times before, not to downplay, but maybe to try to help people understand that like that person in my life would have traded problems with you in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And that's a little selfish to say, and I don't want you to agree with it, but maybe it helps you understand and cope of like, boy, it could be a lot worse.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A friend of mine who has cancer right now, and she's like, it could be worse. And she knows, like, I've connected 3 people who have the same kind of cancer together, all have colon cancer. Yeah. So fortunately enough, like, and unfortunately, 3 people I know had colon cancer at the same time. And I've put them in a group, and I'm still part of this group chat. And I'm like thankful, but I'm like involved in it.
Yeah.
And they're going through things that I just can't imagine. Mm-hmm. And she said things like, man, people have it so much worse than me. Right. And she's got cancer.
Yeah.
So that's a hell of a perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what that's coming back to is like this concept of like gratitude, right? And like I think for a lot of people, you can probably look at your life and realize that there's a lot of things that you like hoped and prayed and wished for that you have now, mm-hmm. right? And so that's not to say like don't have goals, don't continue to like work towards what you want, but look around and be like grateful for a second about what you have, where you came from, and maybe like what you're working with today. Because I bet at some point in your life, you didn't think you would have this, even if it's something like super simple, like, you know, like you never thought you would like own your own house, or you never thought you would have a pet that you always wanted, or a car that you always wanted, or a relationship or anything like that. Like all these things that I think a lot of people take for granted, you know, at some point in time, we probably all questioned like, oh, I don't know if that's going to happen for me, right? Like we all had like some angsty teenage years where like we none of us knew like if it was going to work out or where this whole thing was headed for us. And so I think a lot of people can look around and realize that there's a lot more to be grateful for, and there's a lot more you know that they can like appreciate in their lives.
There are 850 million people in the world who don't have clean water.
Oh, I thought you were going to say in general.
No.
I was like, I think it's like billions.
Yeah. So 850 million people in the world that don't have access to clean water. Don't have clean water.
Yeah. Or like look at the stat for people who still don't have access to like the internet or electricity. Like we have so much in our society that we just wake up every day and like take for granted. And actually this is something that's kind of become a theme with a lot of my clients recently, which is they're making progress. Like all of a sudden, like they're making progress and they don't even recognize it. And I have to point out to them, I'm like, do you realize like the version of you that came in here 6 months ago, a year ago, you would not have reacted this way. And they're like, oh, well, maybe it's just because I'm tired today. I don't have the emotional capacity to react the way I normally would. I'm like, maybe, or maybe it's because it's progress. You know what I mean? And so I think people are very quick to discredit what's going right for them and only focus on the negative and what's going wrong. And I think that's because we ultimately have a society that only focuses on like what's going wrong. Like even when you look at our news outlets, you know, there's a lot that they focus on that's wrong, but you never hear, like on a news channel, you never hear about all the flights that took off every day that took off and landed successfully. That number's not reported. You do hear about the one crash though.
Every 20 years.
Every 20 years. Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's just the fabric, again, of our society. Like we focus on the negative. And so I think it's trained people to focus on what's going wrong in their lives. But I would encourage you to just like take 5 minutes, even like I said, if it's the smallest thing in the world, like be grateful for at least one thing that you have.
What do you think when we talk about negative like that and society acknowledging this nonstop? What do you think about people's social environments and the negativity?
I think it's just, again, it's ingrained. People like to talk about negative things. People like to complain. They like to talk about crazy things that other people did, you know, like gossip and stuff like that. When you hear that,
does that ever turn off for you?
What?
When somebody's an inherently negative person and starts rattling off just negativity in a social environment, a social setting? It's kind
of difficult. I think especially for me being a therapist, you know, sometimes there's always this element too, or oftentimes if people are complaining to me, it's usually because they're looking for something in return. And if I'm in a social setting, I'm just like not really doing it. So I'm very lucky. I think I have like a great core group of friends that are very positive.
That's great.
I have like my husband who's a very like positive person.
That's
and
great.
so for the most part, there's not a lot of negativity flying around. But, you know, I think if anything, from my perspective, when I hear people just talking negatively and being down and being very pessimistic, my gut reaction is kind of, I'm like, oof.
They're in pain.
Yeah, I'm sad for them. I'm like, that must be so miserable to live. Like, I'm sitting here maybe being annoyed that I have to listen to it, but imagine being in like their head, you know, like that must be so difficult for them. So I try to have a lot of empathy, but in terms of them maybe like spending extended amounts of time with those people, no, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I heard on a podcast, this guy's name's Tim Ferriss.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you know who he is. And people who are listening haven't heard about Tim Ferriss or who he is. He has a very profound podcast, but also wrote a book called The 4-Hour Work Week, The 4-Hour Chef, a lot of 4-hour diet.
So smart.
Yeah, the guy was actually a Princeton graduate. I don't think he's from New Jersey, but I know he went to school in Princeton. One thing, so, you know, I literally consume this information nonstop, and I've become an accumulation of all this content, which I've kind of picked and plucked all the things to make my own special little concoction of who Dennis is now, and that'll continue to change the recipe as I find new, better ingredients.
Right.
One thing he said was, you know, there's this theory of you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Yeah. And I got to tell you, I couldn't agree more. And he said, somebody said to him...
Is that why we don't hang out more?
No idea. No, because you bash me nonstop. You'll just crush me. Yeah, she's brutal. She's tough, guys. And he said... Somebody complained to him one time and said, you know, I don't have 5 friends like that. And he said, yes, you do in podcasts and books. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I'm in these podcasts, I listen to very, very, very thoughtful, entrepreneurial, but also what you'll find is people who are entrepreneurs will also be very mindful and they try to practice being better human beings for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I'm just a listener at the table. But every morning, I listen to... when I work out in the morning, and sometimes when I go home at night. And the reason I say sometimes is because my kids like to work out in the basement with me. Right. And it's very, very hard to try to get deep into thought with a bunch of kids working out with me. So I'll just go into club music and envision myself at the Jersey Shore fist pumping. But one thing he said is you could find your circle.
Absolutely.
And I just really, although I don't get to contribute, I just love to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually a conversation I have with a lot of young adults or even just people who are going through a transition in their life. And they're like, the people that I hang out with, this isn't serving me anymore. How do I make friends as an adult, basically? Like, how do I make friends as an adult if I'm no longer fitting in with the people I went to college with? Mm-hmm. I don't like what my coworkers are doing. It's a very big conversation. Or even I work with only adult populations, and I have a few parents right now that are like, I don't do like the mommy brunch wine club PTA thing, but like, how do I then make friends? Like, this is what everyone else my age is doing who's also like a stay-at-home mom. And so it's this really big question of like, how do I make friends? How do I find people that are going to stimulate me? And my first like recommendation is always like, well, what do you want to do? Because there's a group for that somewhere. Mm-hmm. There's either a Facebook group, there's a whole website. I think it's called Monmouth County Meetup. We're here in Monmouth County. And I'm like, go on there. Do you like hiking? I bet there's a club for that. Do you want to do yoga? There's clubs for that. Like, go.
How about create a club?
What?
How about create a club? And
exactly.
Invite people in, yeah.
Exactly. Like, do what you need to do to find the people that you want. But if you don't like who you're hanging out with, there's opportunities to change that. But it's going to take a little more effort than just going along with the flow of the people that you've always just gone along with.
I love entrepreneurial work. I love business. I love purpose. My friends who are very, very deep thinkers, actually, I think I'm probably one of the more deeper thinkers amongst my peers. Very few people that I get to hang out with. And, I'll be honest with you, Had, what's interesting is if there are 4 people I could name off the top of my head right now who I enjoy spending time with, who I think are giving me good energy and I'm giving them good energy back, 2 are not entrepreneurs, 2 are businessmen. And I got to tell you, I get more from the non-entrepreneurs than I do from the guys who are the entrepreneurs and who are very successful. Now, I may get some thoughts and ideas from them about taxes and strategy and business, what's working, what's not. But I think they get a lot from me about life and emotion and purpose and driven and relationships, where it's interesting is that my friends, the other two guys are cops, and one of them be surprised for me to mention his name, and I'm not going to do it here formally on this thing. And you'd be surprised. I'll tell you off air who it is. You'd be surprised at the support I get from this person and why. And this is not somebody who has figured out how to make $1 million a year. Mm-hmm. This is just a person who is living life the way he wants to and gets everything that I understand as well.
Right.
Probably could be, if he wanted to, some mega, quote unquote, successful, but I think he is mega successful in his own mind.
Yeah.
Because you can't put a number on what success is.
Right.
You think you can.
Right. Well, and I think that's important. What you kind of just described is like having variety with like who you hang out with, right? Because if you only surrounded yourself with people who are only in an entrepreneurial mindset, probably get pretty fucking tiring after like a while. You know what I mean? Sure. Like it would be good, but then it would also make you maybe not that well-rounded. You know what I mean? And so I like that it seems like you're drawing on like inspiration from like a ton of different people that aren't all in the same vein, but they're all providing some sort of positive, benefit to your life. And I think that's important to accept people for who they are and accept for what they're adding to your life.
There are things that, well, first of all, when I hang out with some of those guys who are much more business oriented, I actually try to dial it down a little bit for them and just make it a little more fun and a little more vulgar and shit like that, right? Mm-hmm. And for the other guys, I'm very, very comfortable with speaking about business because there's a tremendous amount of barriers that you have to watch what you say because you're so excited about the things that are going on that sometimes you don't realize that you may be offending people.
Yeah.
Which is a little ridiculous in of itself because how are you getting offended for somebody else having a good something happen to them? Right. So if it was for anybody else who was like, hey, I'm having great success with this. I'm a little bit of a harsh critic because I try to live my life to a higher degree. I don't hold myself against what Hannah Haymann's doing or Frankie Rodriguez. I don't give a fuck what you're doing, how many times a week you work out, what you're eating. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me. I hold myself against myself.
Yeah.
So I try to continue to challenge me.
Yes.
And, I live I try to give everybody in the office here a lot of, really, they're all trying to level up and move ahead. And discipline is a number one key factor because once you can start to dial in a lot of things discipline-wise, discipline's hard. It's a decision.
Yeah.
Discipline's a decision. Mm-hmm. But I also am very empathetic and compassionate to the idea that it may not be as easy for so many people because they might be using some of these non-disciplined activities to try to cover up on some other shit.
Yeah. Well, and also just tying it back, from my perspective too, everyone wants a better life, right? Everyone wants more fulfilling relationships. They want to be able to work out. They want to be able to eat well, and like just have like a really good, happy, fulfilling life. But the reason why so many people are unable to attain it is because something's holding them back. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes maybe for a lot of people, it's stuff that they don't even realize. And so that's where I really feel like counseling like comes into play and why I say like everyone could benefit from it because nobody is 100% living their life perfectly or to their highest ability. You know what I mean? Like I would even say that for like you and me. I also consider myself a highly motivated individual, but there's always areas to work on. Oh, there's always room for improvement. There's always like something to like,
I'm open to listen to everything. On. Do tell.
100%.
Give me your fucking secrets because I want to use them. And that's what I've collected. I've been criticized by people in my life. They're like, oh, who said that? Gary Vaynerchuk? I'm like, well, listen, it's no different than Dennis Benino at Street Cop Training. Why do people find themselves so attracted to this training company or me or the other instructors here? Is because we're saying something that makes sense to you. Mm-hmm. You're listening and hearing something going, I agree 100%. And that guy or these people or you provoked something inside of me that I liked.
Right.
I agree with what your position is on that.
Yeah.
And, people are welcome to have their own opinion. People see things differently than the way that I see them. That's just how we feel, and we feel strongly about it. And I think that we, I don't know where I'm going to go with this. Yeah.
I think at the core of it, like what attracted me to Street Cop was that there was like an unbridled passion that like I saw from like everything that was posted on social media and from like everybody that like I met at the company that I was like, I want to be a part of that because I have a lot of passion too for what I do, like with mental health and like the brain and like neuroscience and stuff like that. And so that's, I think, what people are attracted to, because I think at the core of it, people are very apathetic about their lives. Not many people are doing work that they love. Purpose
driven.
Yeah, not many people are in what they would call it like fulfilling relationships, or they don't know how to be in a relationship and fully participate. And so I think people get attracted to this concept and this image of excitement and passion and motivation, and more importantly, the motivation, dedication. Because for anyone who's tried to be an instructor here, myself included, it's not easy putting the program together. You know, it's not easy getting all your ducks in a row. And sometimes you're not motivated to do it, but you have to stay dedicated if you want to be able to do the work. And so I think ultimately, I would say, I think that's what a lot of people are attracted to, because we just don't have a lot of that in society. Mm-hmm. We don't have a lot of people that are excited about their lives and excited about the work that they're doing.
I am a very fortunate man, and I'm fortunate for many, many things, and too many to even list in this conversation. And I have enjoyed and continue to enjoy this journey tremendously. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun on every aspect of it. Even the shitty stuff is, at the end, makes for a good story. And it's all part of the deal. When you can accept that some of the shitty stuff is part of the deal, I just want people to remember, like, don't lose focus of what's important and the work that you're doing, and the generous or generosity that you're giving to the world when you show up and say, I give a fuck. Mm-hmm. Here, I made this for you. It's a very powerful phrase, say, here, I made this. And that's what we do nonstop here. I have a board out there. You should come take a look at it after this. You're going to laugh. I only got half of my notes out of my phone onto the board to visualize them. You're going to fucking laugh.
It's full. It's full.
I literally, I wrote small enough knowing how fucked up it was going to be. I literally got tired and just went, fuck it. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll finish it tomorrow.
Is it this board right
no,
here? Oh, okay.
That's just the instructor board.
Oh my gosh.
Come to the back. Wait till you see this. It's literally like, and Jay started reading it. She was probably there for about 10 minutes reading the whole goddamn board. It wasn't 10 things. It is this collective. And I, as I'm writing it, I'm like, if something happened to me as I left this office today, I'm hoping somebody would take this board and do something great with it. Yeah. Because this is everything that I have to offer, and I've decided not to keep it to myself. Mm-hmm. Because if something that I do saves some cop's life or some kid's life or this or that, which I know it's going to, like literally something on my board says, do videos on water rescue training. Mm-hmm. That's literally going to save people's lives, because cops every year drown. Yeah. Because they don't realize that you can't go into a fucking... First of all, the number one rule of water training is you never get into the water. Mm-hmm. And what sparked it again yesterday, I was driving over the Delaware Water Gap through Trenton, because I went into Pennsylvania briefly. And I saw the rushing water, right? And I'm like, man, I know Trenton doesn't have a marine unit. If you fell into this water, you're fucking done, right? And if you went in to try to rescue somebody in that water, you're fucking done too. So you'd have to figure out a way, and we're so compassionate as police officers that all we want to do is help. And sometimes you don't think blindly you're running to that water trying to help, but you're going to have 2 dead people. That one person might have a death sentence on him. The best you can do is try to get into that water. But if you have to go into the water, what these men and women don't realize is you got to get into your underwear, right? And you got to get down to your underwear. And I get it's cold, and you're going to have shrinkage. Yep. But you can't wade into water in 35 pounds of gear with a bulletproof vest on. You've got to shed that shit. And you have to not worry about what the administration is going to think if somebody takes your gun belt. Mm-hmm. Like, it is what it is. Take the fucking loss of the job, save the life, and at least be alive. Yeah. So there's things like that. Like, there's a 45-second video right there of, and somebody might listen to this right now and say, oh shit, tonight I have a water rescue. That motherfucker said don't go in the water. Yeah. So what are you supposed to do? Grab a throw brag, grab a stick, have rope available, be prepared for that. Think about what the next plan's going to be. Can you get them downriver more? What kind of drowning is it? Is it an electrical drowning? Are they in the water and there's electric in the water? It's pretty fucking wild. So assessing the situation, just in that. I have another one written on there. It's like what to do when somebody's in a car fire. Right? We don't learn any of that, but yet we're the first ones to show up. And what do? We've literally had no training as police officers on what to do in these fire situations. We had some bullshit stuff in the academy, like a day or 2 days of fire training. It's complete horse shit. Right. Where is your fire extinguisher in the car? Do you even have a fire extinguisher? Mm-hmm. Getting up to that car, having a friend suppress that fire while you try to go for the rescue. Maybe having some kind of, they make like these $30 air canisters. Maybe that will give you enough time to try to figure out if anybody's in the car. Maybe taking a stick and poking in the car to see if there's a body in it beforehand. Right. There's a lot of shit you got to think about.
Yeah.
I know we can make it better. And I'm like, man, I can fucking help the world. I'm like, but let me just start with cops.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
let me just start with cops, and then I'll figure it out from there. But once I get this fucking licked, in my mind, and I never want it, there's a Nobel Peace Prize or that says like, yeah, no, you know, in the face of all the adversity, all the bullshit that's thrown your way, your intentions are pure, and you've saved the lives of 1,900 people, and that's honorable. I don't ever want the award. I don't ever want it because of guilt. I don't kind of like it. I'd really have to feel like I've earned it, or people are like, oh, well, he should be acknowledged. Well, then fucking acknowledge me when I'm 87.
Right.
But like, let's not do it just to do it. Let's acknowledge it for what it really is.
Yeah.
And what it really is stepping up and saying, I have this thing.
Yeah.
And I think I should share it with everybody. And I think it's going to help everybody.
Absolutely. No, I feel like the same way, like even when I was stepping into this role and I was planning this program, I was like very cognizant of the fact, I'm like, where do I even start for these officers? Like if this is
the right place.
like, I'm like, if this is literally all they get. And we, at the free trauma 101 course that we did have a gentleman come all the way from Ohio that said, he told us, he was like, we get like half a day in our academy on mental health, and that's it. And I was like, oh my God. And like my heart broke for them because it's the same thing. Like they're not taught how to navigate these waters. And so since that first class that we did, I've been thinking nonstop. Like it's probably like obsessive at this point. I'm like, how to change it, how to make it better. Like what can I do? Because if people are like showing up for this,
it's a good obsession.
It is a good obsession.
Does it keep you up at night?
Yeah,
okay,
it does.
Mine don't.
No.
Not
in like a bad way. Like sometimes like I'm going to bed, I'm like, you know what's a fucking good idea? And then like I write and then like I write it down in my phone, and then like the next day I'll like revisit it and stuff like that. But I think same thing, you know, I'm like, I just like when you care so much, it's really hard to stop caring. And it's really hard to like put limits on yourself sometimes of like how far you go. But it's honestly agreed with you, you know, like I don't want an award. Like, in fact, you know, like don't put me in the spotlight. Like it's not going to go well. I don't want it. But it's the most humbling thing to me. Absolutely. Anytime is like, even a client, if they're like, I just want to say like, thank you. Like what you're doing with me, like it really matters. Or even before this, like Frankie said, he was like, oh, I listened to your episode. I'm like, no, fuck. Did you really? Like in my head, I'm still like blown away that I'm like, people are like valuing this information. And so, again, just bringing it back, you know, I think the reason why like so many people like this is because they see that we care. You know, it's not just
how thoughtful is this?
It's just not like a good enough mentality.
You're
like,
not paid to be here today.
No, absolutely
not.
And
how far did you drive? 45 minutes to come here?
Yeah, I drove 45 minutes to be here, and I was like pumped.
Yeah.
I was like excited.
Yeah.
Like I like bought a coffee on the way in, and I was like, I'm already like too amped to drink this. Like I was like, this is gonna put me over the edge because I just care, and I'm just like so excited to like be here and to see like where things go, and to also be thinking about like what's next steps. Like if they don't have the training, let's give them the training, but then how maybe do I bring the counseling to them and bring the healing to them? And so like these are all like things that like roll over in my mind. So stay tuned, world.
I think you've got a bright future ahead. Like for me, when I hear that from a guy like myself, I know that you're on the right path and there's some great things coming out.
Yeah.
And Hannah, to be honest with you, you're not going to find many people like that in your life.
Yeah.
And when you find them, you fucking hold on to those motherfuckers because they're the best.
Yeah.
Because those are the people that are going to encourage you to do those great things.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So Hannah's been good to me, although she breaks my balls non-fucking stop. I'm actually excited to help you through your entrepreneurial journey, and hopefully do great things together.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I don't know. We can't go any further, Frank. This is it for this podcast episode. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about marriage and police suicide next week. We have plenty of time to do this stuff, and hopefully you guys are finding value in the program. And Hannah's courses are coming up. Check out streetcop.com. You'll find her there. And where else can they find you? You on Instagram? You on the gram?
I need to start an Instagram for Street Cop. I don't have one yet. And I don't personally care about them. So
okay.
I'll do one for Street Cop, but like personally, like you can't really find me anywhere. I did get a Facebook.
The Street Cop Psychologist or some shit like that be good.
Probably. Yeah, something like that.
That's good.
Yeah.
And you could just or you could just use our platform and just give the excerpts out of what you think.
That's true. I could do that too.
You do that too. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Guys, thanks for being with us, and we appreciate your continued support, and I'll continue to show up, and so will Hannah, and so will everybody else here at this program and this company, and we're going to change the world. We're going to make things better. You mark my words.
Yeah.
See you.
Bye.
I wish I had known that this too shall pass. feel bad right now, you feel pissed off, you feel angry, this too shall pass. You feel great, you feel like you know all the answers. You feel like that everybody finally gets you, and there you are. This too shall pass. Ooh, time is your ally, and if nothing else, just wait. Just wait it out.